So they're going to decide, do they want a gap in one of these veterans that could be available, or are they going to try with Trubisky, or figure out a way to go all in and go up and get one of these guys. So it's going to be interesting as we get closer to the end of the season and we get to the free agent period and see what the Bears decide to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's move on to my Indianapolis Colts. Lots to talk about 2019, and obviously the biggest story we talked about earlier, and that's the retirement of Andrew Luck. I mean, big surprise, kind of the shocker that shook the NFL world. But more than that, I think, and maybe this is just me being a Colts fan, but I think the bigger story with the Indianapolis Colts is we could have been in the playoffs. It's easy to have hindsight 2020, and I get that things could have gone in different ways, a million different ways. But as I see it, there's at least 2 or 3 games we could have won had Adam Vinatieri been able to succeed. And I think we've not seen an official statement. I don't think that the Colts are bringing back Adam Vinatieri. I honestly think he's going to retire. I don't know that he has what it takes. My personal theory is he's going to retire and he'll be back as some sort of special teams consultant or coach with the Indianapolis Colts. I think they've got such a good relationship with Adam Vinatieri. Again, that's just a theory. There's no official word about that, but that's just my theory that he retires, but he stays with the Colts organization in some capacity. And then we've got to move on past Jacoby Brissett. Listening to I keep saying Frank Ballard. Greg Ballard's press conference this week, he kind of let us know that we're moving on past Jacoby, but we don't know where. But we do know this to be a fact, Ed and Mo, that they are talking to Phillip Rivers, and he was in town this week. His agent was in town this week. So I know that they're in definite talks with Phillip Rivers. So we'll start with you, Ed. The Colts going into 2020, Adam Vinatieri, Phillip Rivers, no Jacoby Brissett, draft. What are your thoughts?
Well, the Colts showed a lot of loyalty to Vinatieri to stick with him through his first miss and his second miss and his third miss. They really stuck with him. So it wouldn't surprise me if he came back. That's a good relationship. The Colts really stood by his side as he continued to fail through the season, and that did cost him a playoff spot, probably, you could say. So I don't know who the kicker is that replaced him. I don't know if he's going to be good enough, so maybe you need to go out and get a kicker too. As far as the quarterback goes, I'm not a big Phillip Rivers fan at all. I think, to me, he's one of the more overrated quarterbacks that's played this game over the last 10 or 15 years. I'm not a big fan. I know it makes sense because him and Frank Reich have a little bit of history
he'll be a hot.
Oh,
I'm sorry, Ed. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but don't you think even though he's overrated, he's still going to get into the Hall of Fame, Phillip Rivers?
Well, he could. I certainly wouldn't vote for him to get into the Hall of Fame. I don't know if he'll get in. Certainly wouldn't be a first ballot, but maybe at some point he will. I just don't think he's really done enough with the talent that that has surrounded him in certain seasons. I think he's got a below average record in the or below 500 record in the playoffs. I just think he's fairly overrated. The Chargers have had some good teams around him, and they've just kind of haven't done anything with it. But anyway, I know it makes sense for the Colts because Reich and Phillip had that history going back to San Diego with the Chargers. But here's an interesting thing. I don't know where this would go, but why not reach out to Jacksonville and see what they want to do with Nick Foles? Reich and Foles won a Super Bowl in Philadelphia. They have a great relationship. Foles loves Frank Reich. Frank Reich is a minister, off the field, and that's what Foles wants to do. So those two guys, they really respect and admire one another. I know it'd be a big chunk of salary to commit to Nick Foles, but, there is a better history between Reich and Foles than there is with Reich and Rivers. Reich got fired in San Diego thanks to Phillip Rivers. So if I'm the Colts, I would try to reach out to the Jacksonville Jaguars and see what it would take to get Nick Foles to come in.
And maybe they have. In all fairness, Ballard did say in his press conference that he's answering his phone. So maybe they have.
Yeah.
We just don't know about it. But we just know that Phillip Rivers and his team was in town, and they were discussing some possibilities with him. Mo, what are your thoughts? Adam Vinatieri, Jacoby Brissett, Phillip Rivers, the quarterback situation. What is the outlook for 2020 with the Indianapolis Colts, the draft, and so forth?
Well, I don't put all the blame on Adam Vinatieri. Obviously, he missed some field goals in some key moments. But to me, as we even talked about early on, I was one of the Jacoby Brissett naysayers. I think he holds on to the ball way too long. I think he's very indecisive. I think the game looks like it's a little too fast for him at times, and I didn't like that. From the standpoint of the Colts. The quarterback. I don't like Phillip Rivers as a quarterback, because here's what would bother me would be him completing the season and not deciding to retire. I mean, the guy still drives from San Diego to LA. He's got 9 kids out there. He's a big-time family guy. I don't see him being that far away from his family. I just don't see that working. The guy that's interesting to me is Jameis Winston, who will be a free agent. If you could figure out a way to curb some of the bad mistakes that he does make, the interceptions.
I was going to say, wouldn't he be a PR nightmare?
But on the field, the guy can flat out throw the football. It's just making the bad decisions, throwing all the interceptions. So if you could get with the right guy that I think that could control it, that would be an interesting. The kid's still young. He can rifle the football down the field. Threw for the most yards in the NFL this year. Jameis Winston to me would be an interesting option at quarterback if you felt that you had the right personnel to work with him. Other than that, it's probably going to be a year to where they find a veteran to bring in to just kind of shore up that gap till they figure out what they're going to do at quarterback. But Jameis seems interesting. I think you have to overpay probably for Teddy Bridgewater. I think a lot of teams are going to be interested in him, including his current team, the Saints. Cam Newton can't stay healthy and would be expensive. And I like what Ed saw with Nick Foles and Frank Reich reunion in Indianapolis.
Yeah, and maybe that is happening. You would think, based on what Ed has said and what we know to be fact, that Frank Reich has said, "Hey, I'd like to talk to Nick Foles." And there's a lot that comes together. There's a lot of money that's going to have to be paid. They'll pay more money for Nick Foles to maybe not be the franchise quarterback. I think they're focusing on getting their franchise quarterback, whether that's in the draft or whether that might be. Maybe if Tua comes, what he'll announce on Monday, if he's coming into the draft, I kind of think that he won't. I kind of think he'll come back to Alabama, especially in lieu of the fact that they didn't make the playoffs this past year. But with his health, it might hurt his rankings even if he goes into the draft. So he might still be available late in the first round. This is a hypothetical for the Colts to pick up and look at in the future. So a lot going on there. Let's talk about the coaching changes. We'll start with you, Ed Kracz. Obviously, the biggest elephant in the room is Jason Garrett. Not beneficial. Kind of like what? Of course, his contract ends in January 14th. Maybe they're just riding the clock out so they can just, end it. But apparently, according to Adam Schefter, yesterday's tweets that the talks aren't happening anymore with Jason Garrett. I think Jason Garrett knows that he's moving on. Two-part question here. One, who do the Colts go after? The Cowboys go after. Is it Lincoln Riley? Is it Urban Meyer? Is it the Baylor coach? Who do they go after? Is it another NFL coach that might not be around anymore? Obviously, Riviera got scooped up. Who does so there's a lot of coaching here. So you got Carolina. You got the Browns, and so you look at some of these coaching things. But the biggest story out there right now is the Dallas Cowboys looking for a coach that hasn't even let their coach go officially. Ed, what are your thoughts? Dallas Cowboys, Jason Garrett, make us feel good, sir.
Well, Jerry's really taking his time with this whole Jason thing. He doesn't want to, offend him or hurt his feelings. I know when Jerry Jones fired Tom Landry, Hall of Famer Tom Landry, he went to the golf course where Tom Landry was playing golf, and pulled him off the course and had a meeting with him and fired him right then and there. And I know that Jerry regretted that through the years. In fact, Tom Landry was invited back to get inducted into the Cowboys Ring of Honor, and he refused for several years until they were able to finally smooth things over before he passed away and induct him into the Ring of Honor. And I think Jerry kind of regretted the way he handled that, and maybe that's why he's trying to handle this thing with Jason Garrett with kid gloves. I mean, they do have a long relationship together, him and Garrett. Garrett's been the coach for 10 years, and he's been with the Cowboys even longer than that. So, he probably feels like he's a son to him and wants to kind of let him down easily, I guess, and that's why, we're really not seeing a whole lot of the clarity on what they're doing there in Dallas. But, Jason Garrett, to me, he won't be back. And so now you got to turn your attention to who exactly. I mean, I know, Jerry had great success bringing in his old college roommate, Jimmy Johnson, and they won Super Bowls. And then he got Barry Switzer in there, another former coach, and Switzer won a Super Bowl. So, he could go back to that type of success and bring in a college coach, even though college coaches don't tend to do well transitioning into the NFL. There's more of a miss rate than there is a hit rate. So Jerry could go that direction. You named the candidates that are out there that could possibly do it. I don't see someone like Saban coming or Urban Meyer coming in just because I think his personality would be too strong to work with Jerry and his son Stephen Jones. So to me, he may go in the direction of hiring a coordinator from another team. But then, does Jerry want to bring in an outside set of eyes to kind of look at his team in a fresh way? I don't know. I think he needs to do that, but, he's so protective of his team and his players, and he may not want someone to come in and kind of tell it like it is with him. I know he tried that with Bill Parcells, and that didn't work out. So it'll be interesting to see where they go. There's certainly a lot of directions they could turn, and maybe that's why he's kind of taking his time with Jason Garrett, is he kind of wants to look at the landscape, see what's out there. He could be waiting for someone like the Baltimore Ravens to be done in the playoffs and maybe interview Greg Roman, their offensive coordinator. He might have his eye on some coach that's still alive in the playoffs, and he's just kind of waiting until that team is eliminated to be able to talk to him. So it's certainly an interesting situation to watch, but, I think he'll move on from Garrett and look to hire somebody. I have no idea who. He could go college, or he could go with an assistant in the NFL right now, or a former head coach from the NFL.
Mo, what are your thoughts on Jason Garrett, and also your Cleveland Browns looking for a coach? Another name, and we talked about Urban Meyer. Certainly, Lincoln Riley's still going to be in discussion for the Bengals, but Mike McCarthy as well from the Packers, the name that we haven't talked about a lot, but certainly he's in the mix and conversations of people that the Browns might be interested in. From your seat, what are the Browns looking at, Mo?
Well, they want somebody to come in basically who's going to adhere to the analytics. Here's what sums up the Browns. They let go of the football guy to keep the baseball guy, Paul DePodesta, who came from the Mets. So that's kind of where the Browns are. They figured, you know what? Even though we have a football team, let's keep the baseball guy around. And since John Dorsey can't get along with him, we'll get rid of the football guy and we'll keep the baseball guy. I mean, obviously, I think the best shot at head coach, if you're a Browns fan, would be Lincoln Riley, Baker Mayfield's former coach, a guy who's got a lot of charisma, a lot of fun ideas on offense, a guy who is very commanding, even though he's a younger guy. Jason Garrett would be a huge mistake for the Browns, but they're not above making those mistakes. They like to do it pretty often. If you're the Cowboys, if I'm Jerry Jones, here's what I would attempt to do. Not that it could ever happen, but here's what I would attempt to do. Look at the one that got away, Sean Payton, a guy who, depending on what happened with Drew Brees, if he decided to call it a career or if they won a Super Bowl, would you stay in New Orleans, or would you throw the most money a head coach has ever been paid and try to make a trade with the New Orleans Saints for Sean Payton, who is a former member of the Dallas Cowboys staff? Probably the one that they should have kept a hold on to a long time ago. So, not that it would ever happen, but that would be an interesting thought for the Dallas Cowboys. Would be Sean Payton.
Well, guys, it's time to wrap it up and put a bow on it. So we'll start with you, Ed. Give us some final words of wisdom as we go into Wild Card Weekend, and where can people find your work and masterpieces, sir?
I think look at the Patriots game. Tom Brady, this could be the last time we see Tom Brady play in the NFL. I mean, I know he hasn't looked like the same quarterback. Looks like Father Time might finally be starting to catch up to him. He could retire at the end of the season. I think Brady is so competitive, I'm not sure he'll do that. But he has to look in the mirror and see, hey, do I want to keep doing this? I mean, he's not been the same. And I think the Titans could upset the Patriots. So that's that to me, we could be looking at Tom Brady's final game sometime, Saturday evening.